Well, hi there. I'm Diana Montford, the world's first transgender television journalist. Look it up on YouTube. I really am the first. Anyway, born male, became female. How do you like them apples? Anyway, my guest is Mr. Rich Wandel, who is the historian archivist at the LGBTQ Center here in New York. He catalogs LGBTQ history. For posterity, he has the most amazing things. He can take any film, any, say, home movie or VHS video or whatever you might have, a three-quarter video, and turn it into contemporary, whatever you'd call it. Format, yeah. And and it can be preserved forever. So all this is totally free. If you have stuff to give it to the center, the archives, because posterity will thank you for it. Any folders, any flyers, anything from, say, 1970, 75, whenever, that you might have, the center is waiting. Anyway, Rich is going to tell us all about the center archives and how you can avail yourself of their services, either as a researcher or as a contributor. Mr. Rich Wandel.
Hi.
Well,
Good to be here again.
Well, I'm so glad. So now, let me ask you now, these, these things that you have, what exactly do you have and what are you looking for?
Well, at this point, the Center's archive, that's our shorthand for it, the Center's archive has about 2,000 feet of materials. A foot being your standard business carton is nominally a foot. So I'm saying the equivalent of 2,000 of those we have. All kinds of materials are in there. A great deal, of course, is paper or magazines or things of that nature, but also we have a very large media collection, both audio and video. And the video specifically is in many different formats. Older formats such as Umatics, which is a very large, at its time, professional format. VHSs, of course, the various different formats of the tapes that would fit right into the camera. And all of these, of course, are formats that are no longer in use, and therefore they need to be converted, or as archivists say, migrated into more modern formats.
Can you then, when contemporary formats grow obsolete, can you take these and make them into future formats? Hopefully.
Of course, at this point, when we migrate into a new format, it's going to be a digital format. When you're talking about the older analog tapes, that first copy has to be done in real time. If it's a 2-hour program, then it's going to take you 2 hours to make that first copy.
Right.
Once it's digitized, of course, that's no longer true. Even then, so if we need to change it at some future date, and undoubtedly we will, to another format, it'll already be digitized and therefore be able to more quickly.
And these films will last centuries, won't they?
Hopefully. The problem with digital media, actually no digital media is in and of itself permanent. As compared to the old film, for example. Film will easily, under proper conditions, last 100 years or more.
Absolutely.
That's not true of digital media. So the strategy in digital media has to be to copy it from time to time. For ourselves at our archive and with what our resources are, if it's an audio tape, it goes immediately onto a server. If it is a videotape, which is of course a much larger files, then we put them onto DVD. Ultimately, though, it will always be a case, it'll be a case of putting them on servers. The modern computer servers are such that there's always 2 copies of everything and it's constantly being checked for its integrity. And if something goes wrong with one, it's automatically replaced by the other. So that's the solution to the digital media.
Do you then make a second copy of the second copy, so you have two, always two?
We always have two, right.
What do you do when films are on YouTube? For example, we've been putting a lot of transgender history on YouTube. We film it here at the studio, and it goes immediately to YouTube. Can you take it from YouTube and do something with that?
For the most part, things that are designed to be viewed on computer are less complete than the original file. It's compressed. And that's true whether you're talking about a still photograph or a tape or anything.
Are you saying there are fewer frames in the YouTube films?
So what that means is, so if you're talking simply about, say I'm an author and I want to look at this video so that I can quote the person, watching it in that compressed format is no problem. It's perfect for what I need. However, if you're in the process of making a documentary, which is ultimately going to be on a big screen,
right?
You want a more complete file.
Will that change
than
over
the compressed
time,
one.
do you think?
I think what'll change.
So many things are on YouTube that are nowhere else.
Right. Well, ultimately, of course, if you're a documentarian, you work with what you have. You have no other choice. You simply work with what you have. But by doing it in other formats as well, not simply on a compressed YouTube kind of format or an MP3 and MP4, those formats which are compressed, then you're able to better service somebody who wants to take that and then reuse the clip on a bigger screen or whatever.
Now, you've told me that many of the films that I gave you from the show's early years can be accessed.
Right. We are. You have generously given us your programs from a while back, and your program, as well as others, are a treasure house of the history of.
That's why we do it, and that's why I gave it to you. Yeah.
You are. The people you interview are oftentimes an expert in whatever their particular area is.
Like you.
They are also a good insight into the status of any issue at that time.
Exactly. Yeah.
At that time, and that needs to be preserved, regardless of whether or not that person is famous. It's not. It's not so much a question of stars, although that's nice also. But it's
good old Quentin Crisp, wherever he may be.
And that needs to be preserved for its content, as well as for its usability as a video, or in the case of our audios, as an audio. The community center itself, over the years, has done an enormous number of discussion panels on any number of topics with the people who clearly were the leaders and the experts at that time on whatever that particular topic was. And because we have taken them into the archive and are migrating them into more modern formats, they will be usable. They will be seen by oftentimes it's by scholars. It's by somebody writing that thesis or that second book or making that documentary.
I can't tell you how many times that show I did with Quentin Crisp in September 27, 1991. It's been stolen by every university on earth, and that's just fine with me. Just take it. It's yours.
And I think that's a wonderful attitude. That is exactly what the attitude is at the Center's archive. It is our job to preserve them and to make it available. There's no point in preserving something if you don't also make it available. I mean, what's the point?
Really?
What's the point? So we certainly let people know we need money and ask for donations, but we don't charge them to view it. We charge them only a small fee for making a copy so that they can put it into that documentary or whatever. Because we're very determined that there should be no limitation on who's allowed to see and use this material. And that includes that there should be no economic
not unlike years ago going to the library and using one of the old, where you could get anything copied on a photostat or something.
Right. And so And the collection as a result is amazing. What
do you have?
It's easy for me to mention a few names that people recognize, and I do like to do that.
But everyone's
Edward
stuff
Albee,
is important.
for example,
Yeah, sure.
Elaine Stritch is important. But
she was gay.
But she's certainly one of the people that many people in the gay community
I met her at the
looked up
center.
to.
Yes,
right, and they are important. But equally important is all those endless panels of people discussing what was current at the time, what was important, and in most cases still is important, and see how things are. To take, if I may, just look at the progression of the transgender community. All right, a long way to go. All right, but in recent years,
well, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yes, that's true also. Well, the center began its transgender programs. I'm not sure the exact date offhand, but a good, certainly at least 25 years ago, when essentially it was not being done. At the very
least, because in 1999, I used to go to the Gender Identity Project. They had a discussion group, a weekly discussion group, headed by Carrie Davis, and it gave me great self-confidence to meet and talk with other trans folk, and we all have a lot of the same issues, and it changed my life. I probably would not be as mouthy and brave as I am if not for that.
That's obviously true, but if I may, I would like to talk about its worth from another point of view. I don't happen to be transgender, so what is its importance to me? And I find that especially in the past few years, with the rise of the transgender community speaking for themselves, it's enormously important to me. Certainly, I'm coming from a position like everybody else at the center, if everybody has a right to their own being and to their own self. But beyond that, it's very the existence and the visible existence of the transgender community allows me to be more free. All right. And there's still obviously prejudice in the wider society, but there's also remains a good deal of prejudice within the gay and lesbian community as well, all right? So I still sometimes will hear people, especially in June around Pride Day, somebody saying, oh, but why do they have to be so outrageous in the parade? And my answer to that, in addition to the fact that because they have a right to be whoever hell they want to be, all right, but in addition to that, if I'm in a place where somebody is more outrageous than I happen to be, outrageous in quotes.
You're quite outrageous, in fact. You're not outrageous.
Right, right. But it allows me to investigate being a little bit more outrageous myself. It takes away some of the fear, because compared to that all-feathered person over there, right, I'm nothing. I'm not, I'm dull. And so it allows me to explore things within myself that, for lack of an ability to explore them, I wouldn't even know are here. All right? So it's not even a case of my saying, gee, I wish I could, but I'm too afraid. It's not even knowing fully what's me, unless and until I have those people who are so much more so, and that's freeing. And the whole area of gender is a very, the discourse on gender today is extremely fluid. Compared to however it's been before in our culture, not in every culture, but in our culture, and that's tremendously liberating. Our community, if you talk about gender, or if you talk about sexual preference, everybody in the room is going to immediately agree that it's not binary, all right, that it's not an either or, but they are very quickly going to revert back into talking as if it were.
Because we've all been conditioned along certain lines.
Right, and it's very difficult to break out of that.
I have great difficulty.
Right. And people such as the transgender community or the bisexual community, and all of these are to a certain extent artificial words. We're just a wide, wonderful range of people.
When I have to call a non-gender person, they are they, or, you know, it's very difficult to keep that straight.
That has to do with custom. Or normally when one is speaking in conversation, writing is different because you revise it, you go back and revise it. But in speech, you don't stop and think before you use a pronoun. It's automatic. So it is difficult at times to remember that a particular person prefers, as is their right, to use they or their. All right. Yeah. But it's important that it's important that I retrain myself.
Yeah.
And do it, because people have a right to be who they are.
Yes, but they have to also be patient with people who don't get it right away.
All right.
Now, what are you looking for? People out there have handouts from 1968 and copies of the Village Other and other things, you know, ads for Michael Salem's TV Boutique from 1974, something like that. They're not famous people, they just happen to have this stuff, and maybe they're, you know, dying and older, and they want to give it a good home.
Or maybe they're just finally cleaning out their closet.
Yes.
All puns intended.
Yes, so there you go.
Right.
But, you know, do you want this stuff?
Yes. Our collecting policy essentially is pretty much anything LGBT, and that's whether by reason of content or by reason of who it is. And this is pretty much true of any archive. If you take in a person's personal papers, we're not going to look at it and say, well, this part is about being gay and this part isn't, so we're going to get rid of this and we're going to. You want to keep the whole person. So if you're LGBT and snapshots, if you're one of the few people in the modern world who actually keeps a journal, that's magnificent.
Don't look at me.
Yeah,
I don't keep
family films, whatever. You know, when we first started this archive, which is 27 years ago, all right, at that time, believe it or not, it was still a world in the U.S. where the belief was that there were very, very few LGBT people around. All right, even and indeed transgender, especially, there was a consciousness to a certain extent of the performer, of the drag queen, but not much more than that.
Excuse me.
And so even the snapshot at a person's private party, which was largely gay and lesbian, became important because the charge against the way of opposing us has always been to pretend we don't exist.
Exactly.
So even those simple documents become very important. And that's true to this today. I mean, recently in the news is the horrible things that are happening in Chechnya, the attacks on LGBT people, attacks, killings, torture. And what was that government's first response when somebody said something about it? Their first response was, there are no such people here. So that tactic against us is still very much in use. In addition to that, most of us were raised perhaps in a religion or at any rate a sense of culture which told us that we were bad. And it's one thing to come to an intellectual understanding that that's nonsense. But it's another thing to say, well, what do? I have this whole sense of culture and history, my people, whether that's Catholic or Protestant, Italian or Jewish, whatever it is. And for most of us, I think, that needs to be replaced. And LGBT history is an important way of understanding that replacement. I think of my cultural ancestors, not so much as the bloodline anymore, but I think of them as the great many men and women through history that have been part of the community that I am now a part of.
Absolutely. And I knew people who are no longer among us. I mean, Hollywood Lawn, I met Candy Darling. I mean, the wonderful Francesco Scarulo, who was very kind to me when I was 17 and advised me on career, you know, I mean, which is what I asked him. I actually waylaid him in his townhouse and said, excuse me, hi, you don't know me, but can you tell me how I can get started in show business? And instead of saying police, all right, listen, You have to be sensible. You have to go to school for this. You have to. He was very good, you know.
And among all other things, you have to really want it badly.
Yes.
Because that is a rough road.
And this is how I do it, badly. No, but no, Francesco Scavullo was a great guy and he was gay. And just, you know, a lot of wonderful people I've met who are no longer around. And that, you know. Do you do oral histories?
Not so much because I don't have the staff to do it. All right.
Yeah.
So they come to us sometimes in other ways. They come to us in the sense that there are other people talking about their lives or one part or another of it, which then winds up in our collection. So there is some of that. But we do not currently have an ongoing oral history project.
Although all the, I like to think this show's sort of an oral history.
Of course.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, if people want to donate money, that necessary green paper, how do they do that?
The money, of course, goes to the community center as a whole, but it is important to me. The community center is the one who, the archive is a program of the community center. If it weren't for the ongoing support, financial and otherwise, the program would not exist or would not continue to exist. So the check is made out to the center as a whole, but I do like it when you give it to me so that I can give it to them so that they know that it came by reason of the archive.
Can they write a check and in parentheses put for the archive?
Yeah, or there's usually on the check that little line at the bottom of what it's for.
I've been using cards now so long. I haven't written a check in 20 years.
I don't either, actually, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But if you stroll into the center, into the front desk, they're quite capable of taking credit cards, and they will ask you what program is for. Not in the sense that it will be officially set aside for that, but that they know what's being supported.
Yeah, and really, you could say that the archive is the most important part. Well, one of the most important parts of the center, because what are we without our history?
Yeah, there are a lot of important parts to the center, but certainly we're among them.
Absolutely, because, you know, I mean, it's because of the archives that we can find all sorts of things that you can't find anywhere else, that don't exist anywhere else.
And if you're a researcher or just a curious person, you are welcome in the archive. The center has both an archive and a lending library. I'm the archivist, not the librarian, but there is also a lending library.
Do you watch over
there.
people so some crazy malicious person doesn't walk in and I want to see this?
Yeah. Well, that danger is the only reason we would ever not allow somebody to see
But
something.
how would you know until?
Well, you watch them. Of course, they're there. You're there when they're doing it. But community-based archives are notoriously open to everyone, and that certainly includes us. We are not going to worry about whether you have the proper academic credentials, for example, to be here. We're not going to worry about, well, is this for a book you're doing or an article? What are you doing? You know, I may ask you that because knowledge of that might help me to help you, but not as a prerequisite in any way. So while it's true, like most archives, the majority of our researches are people doing their thesis or their second book or the documentary. We do get and we do welcome undergraduate students, high school students, people who are just curious. I'm not writing anything, I just was wondering about this. And that's sufficient reason.
Young people are especially welcome because they'll get a strong sense of our history.
Right.
You know?
And on occasion, I actually speak to groups also.
How can they contact you
often,
for that?
They're most often college groups, but they have at times been high school
How
groups
can
also.
they contact you?
Just call or write to the center or email to the center and ask for the archive. If you email, it's richw@gaycenter.org, or if you can't remember that, archive@gaycenter.org will reach me also.
And maybe Rich will come and give a talk at your
or you'll come to us,
gathering.
or either go there, or you're coming here. Either way is fine.
Yeah. And again, if you have stuff to give, like actual artifacts, no matter how seemingly trivial, as Rich said, photographs at a party or whatever. You know?
Exactly. I get calls sometimes from people, and they'll start the conversation with something like, "I have a lot of these advocates. Do you want them?" And the advocate, of course, needs to be preserved, but it's
Yes.
not exactly rare.
No,
Okay.
well,
It's not
presumably the advocate is preserving the
Right,
advocate,
right.
you know?
But then I start asking them, and I ask them about what else they might have. Do they have those snapshots? Have they saved letters? Do they have flyers because they were on every mailing list in the world?
Yeah.
All of these possibilities we're into again, and we're interested in the whole person also. If we're going to take in your personal papers, and our archive has personal papers, it has organizational records, and it has what's called an artificial collection, which is like somebody was on every mailing list in the world and then gave it to us. All of those things, as well as magazines.
I don't understand. An artificial collection?
It means it doesn't have a single maker, a single creator in our jargon, all right? It's if I, as I am, of course, on a mailing list from all these different organizations,
Right.
I'm getting all these flyers. That's an artificial collection in the sense that it doesn't have
I see what you're saying,
It doesn't
yes.
have a single creator.
Okay, now, again, how can they contact you if they need you to speak somewhere or they want to meet you? Or?
You can call, or better yet, email at me at the center, which is archive@gaycenter.org. It is always good, actually, if you're a researcher also, to do that first, because much of our stuff is off-site, and we're happy to bring it in. But just showing up at the door is not going to be there already. It'll take us a few days to get it for you.
I even had photographs of my long-dead great-grandmother copied for you on the theory, and I gave you my old ID cards and everything.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, you know. Now, anything else you'd like to say?
No. Also, the guide, the catalog to our collections, to our what we call our manuscript collections, are on the center's website, and
Yes.
it is searchable separately from the rest of the website.
And you're open Thursday afternoons?
And actually, I'm usually there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoons.
Okay.
Right.
Anyway, this has been the Diana Montford Show. My guest has been historian archivist Rich Wandel of the LGBTQ Center here in New York. I can't say enough about the archives. They're great, and they preserve our history. And whatever you have, call them and see if they're interested, and they probably will be. No matter how trivial it seems to you, it's history to posterity. I'm Diana Montford. This has been the Diana Montford Show. I love you a lot. You know I do. And I want you to take good care of yourself. And I want you to love yourself. I love you, even if nobody else loves you, so hey, we're a team, right? I love you a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye.